One 23-year-old email just uh, completely derailed the biggest power broker in Hollywood, and essentially threw the 2028 Olympic Games into absolute chaos.
Yeah, it's forcing this massive collision between public optics, raw political power, and, billion-dollar corporate sponsorships.
Right. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today is Saturday, March 14th, 2026, and we are putting you right in the middle of a really fast-moving storm here.
A very messy storm.
Exactly. So let's get you caught up with a quick 90-second news desk version of what just happened. Yesterday, the Los Angeles City Council voted on a major resolution directly targeting a man named Casey Wasserman.
Right.
He's the chairman of the LA28 Olympic Committee. He's the guy in charge of bringing the games to California. And his name just surfaced in the newly released Jeffrey Epstein files.
Yeah, and not just in passing.
No. Specifically, in some pretty graphic emails from 2003 sent to the convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell.
And the fallout from that hit almost instantly. I mean, huge pop stars and legendary Olympic athletes are actively fleeing his private talent agency right now.
Just dropping him.
Right. But the wild part of this story, the part that is frankly breaking the brains of local politicians, is that the Olympic Committee is absolutely refusing to let him go.
They are completely digging in their heels. So we've got a huge stack of sources on the table today to make sense of this. We're looking at the actual text of the LA City Council resolution from yesterday, some really deep reporting from The Guardian and CBS News, and the raw data records from the Epstein Files Transparency Act.
It's a lot of paper.
It is. Our mission today is to unpack this collision between Hollywood royalty, dark secrets, and the global machinery of the Olympic Games. We're going to figure out who actually holds the power in Los Angeles.
Yeah. And to understand this standoff, we really have to look at the mechanism that brought these secrets into the light in the first place. Because none of this scandal happens without a new piece of legislation called the Epstein Files Transparency Act.
All right, let's unpack the mechanics of that law. It passed back in November 2025, and it had this massive, rare, bipartisan push behind it. We are talking about a 427-to-1 vote in the House of Representatives.
Which is unheard of.
Right. You never see that kind of unified voting on anything, let alone something this explosive.
Well, you don't see it because usually politicians look for a wedge issue. But in this case, the political calculus was completely inverted. No elected official on either side of the aisle wanted to be caught on record voting against transparency for Jeffrey Epstein's network.
Yeah, the optics of a no vote were just pure poison.
Exactly. Yeah. So the law sails through, and it forces the Department of Justice to release unredacted documents from the entire Epstein investigation. Yeah. And they only had 30 days to comply.
And after some logistical delays, on January 30, 2026, the DOJ released a staggering 3.5 million pages of files to the public. I mean, stop and think about that number for a second. 3.5 million pages. Imagine someone taking every single email you sent in your 20s, every calendar invite, every flight, log dumping them online, and just letting the internet parse them for crimes.
Yeah. The logistical nightmare of compiling that data is hard to overstate. Investigators had to pull from decades of hard drives, subpoenaed server backups, physical paper trails.
Wow.
And when you release a data dump of that magnitude, you aren't just exposing convicted criminals. The net catches everyone.
Is huge.
It ensnared powerful people who simply communicated with Epstein's inner circle, even if it was just like a passing business inquiry.
Right. I picture this Transparency Act like someone taking a massive black light into the VIP section of the world. Suddenly you flip the switch and you see exactly who was hanging out where, who was emailing who, and what they were saying when they thought no one was looking. You just get caught in the blast radius by association.
Exactly. And the files included everyone from global politicians to prominent scientists to Hollywood executives. So the sheer volume of mundane communication mixed with horrific criminal enterprise, it just created a very messy public reckoning. Yeah. And that massive unfiltered data release is what directly set the stage for the Wasserman scandal.
Which brings us from that mountain of 3.5 million pages down to one specific man. Because when researchers and journalists started running search queries through that newly public database, one name popped up over 100 times: Casey Wasserman.
Right. And we need to establish who Casey Wasserman actually is, because he's not just some random executive. He is the definition of Hollywood royalty. Yeah. He's the grandson of the legendary studio mogul Lew Wasserman, the man who basically invented the modern talent agency business.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Casey inherited that legacy and runs a massive sports and entertainment agency of his own. But crucially, he holds the Rolodex to every billionaire in California, which is exactly why he is the mastermind behind bringing the 2028 Olympics to Los Angeles.
So he connects the money to the talent.
Precisely.
But out of those 100 mentions in the files, there is one specific smoking gun making headlines. It's an email dated April 1st, 2003. Wasserman, who's a married man at the time, sent a message to Ghislaine Maxwell.
Right.
He wrote, "Where are you? I miss you. Can we book that massage now?"
And, Ghislaine Maxwell is currently serving a 20-year prison sentence for child sex trafficking.
Right. And Wasserman quickly issued a defense statement when this broke. He says he deeply regrets the correspondence. He points out that this happened decades before her horrific crimes came to light.
Yeah.
And he states very clearly that he never had a personal or business relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, and that he only flew on Epstein's private plane once for a Clinton Foundation humanitarian mission to Africa back in 2002.
So he is aggressively trying to put a firewall between himself and the actual criminal activities of that network.
Wait, hold on. Let me push back on this for a second.
Sure.
Because I'm looking at this 2003 email. He's asking for a massage. It is gross, sure. It's a bad look for a married guy. But are we really ending a guy's career in 2026 over a 23-year-old creepy text?
Well,
I mean, is there an actual crime here, or is this just moral panic?
yeah.
Because our sources confirm he is not facing any criminal charges whatsoever.
Right, and that tension is the entire core of this story. You are pointing out the exact legal reality here. This is not a criminal trial for Wasserman.
Right.
But he is facing a trial of public perception driven by the association fallacy.
Meaning, if you are linked to bad people, the public assumes you are also bad, regardless of a courtroom verdict.
Exactly. The argument his critics make is strictly about moral authority. Think about the brand of the Olympic Games. It is marketed as the ultimate global celebration of human dignity, fairness, excellence.
Yeah, that's the whole pitch.
Right. So the question tearing Los Angeles apart right now is, does someone tied to a global sex trafficking ring, even tangentially, even decades ago, have the moral standing to lead an event celebrating human dignity?
Because sponsors hate proximity to scandal. I mean, Visa and Coca-Cola do not care about the nuances of the association fallacy as a philosophical concept.
Not at all.
They just care about their shiny corporate logos sitting next to an Epstein headline in the morning paper.
Yeah. And we see that panic playing out in completely opposite ways depending on whether you look at Wasserman's private business or his public Olympic role.
Well, let's look at that split. Starting with his private talent agency. The collapse there was instant. I mean, the cultural tide turned overnight. Massive stars read the news and immediately cut ties.
Right.
The singer Chappell Roan dropped his agency. Olympic soccer legend Abby Wambach dropped him and went a step further, publicly urging him to resign.
And the musician Bethany Cosentino put out a public statement that really captured the mood of the entertainment industry right now. She criticized the business for giving, quote, endless grace to powerful men.
Wow.
She essentially said people are exhausted by being asked to treat proximity to horrific crimes as just an unfortunate little situation we should all move past.
Yeah, and under that intense public and financial pressure, Wasserman caved. He recently announced he was stepping away from his talent agency and putting the entire company up for sale. He basically surrendered his private business.
But then we look at the public sector, the Olympic Games. And here is the great paradox of this entire saga. Despite stepping down from his own private company, the LA28 board completely retains him as chairman.
They kept him. And they used a classic corporate shielding tactic to justify it. The board hired a high-profile white shoe law firm, O'Melveny & Myers, to conduct an internal investigation.
Right.
And that investigation predictably cleared him, basically saying his relationship with Epstein and Maxwell didn't go beyond what was already publicly documented.
Yeah, and when a board hires a firm like O'Melveny & Myers in a situation like this, they aren't necessarily looking for absolute moral truth. They're buying a liability shield.
Exactly.
It allows them to face the press and say, look, we had an independent entity look at this, and we are legally cleared to move forward.
Right. Gene Sykes, the head of the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, publicly bashed Wasserman too. He went on record saying he has supreme confidence in Wasserman's operational capabilities.
Yeah.
Imagine
But let me
finding out
highlight
your
this
electric
glaring
bill
contradiction
is
here.
secretly
do.
funding
He
the
is too
government's massive
compromised to
spending
run
addiction.
his own
It is
private
a
talent
pretty
agency
shocking
where he just
realization when you
manages
actually
singers
look
and
at the math.
athletes.
Right.
But he
Well,
is
imagine
perfectly
for a
fine
second that
to
you
run
have
the
a
public
savings
Olympic
account.
Games, representing an entire major American city hand over heart. How does that math work? That this
Well, the
money was
math
strictly
always
for
comes down to
fixing
the
a
money.
leaking roof.
It is crucial to understand
said,
the legal structure
if we
here.
don't fix this
LA28
roof,
is a
house
private,
is gonna
nonprofit
collapse.
organization.
It's an existential
It is
crisis
not
for the
a
house.
city
Exactly.
agency.
It's the Save the House
It does
Fund.
not report to
But
the
then,
taxpayers.
your car breaks
The people
down,
on that
you spend a little
board
too much on
view
groceries,
Casey
you've got
Wasserman
bills
as
piling up.
too big to
So what
fail
do?
because of
You
his
raid the
fundraising
roof fund.
capability.
Because he
You take
holds
that
the keys
money,
to the
pay off your
corporate
credit cards, and tell your family, hey,
The
don't
Olympic
worry,
Games
fix
cost
the roof
billions
later.
of dollars to execute.
And in this scenario,
Wasserman is the
roof is the
ultimate
planet,
power broker
or
who
at least
brings in those
Maryland's climate
massive
goals.
corporate dollars,
And the car is a
keeping the Los
massive,
Angeles Games
self-inflicted
afloat. For the board members
$1.5
sitting in that room,
billion
financial
state
survival
budget
simply
deficit.
A
outweighs
completely
public
avoidable
optics.
deficit, I might add.
They
Welcome to the
calculate
deep
that
dive.
replacing him
Today
ruins
we're
their funding
exploring a
pipeline,
classic
so they
case
decide
of
they can
fiscal
just
sleight of
weather
hand
the
coming
public
out of
relations
Annapolis.
storm.
We're looking at
that
the
works in a
Strategic
corporate
Energy
boardroom.
Investment Fund.
But take that
Let's say
same
if
financial calculation
It's
down
a
to
huge
City
pot
Hall,
of money
and
meant
it
to save the
instantly
environment.
collides with
But it's
elected
turning into a
officials
hidden
who
tax
actually have
on
to
every
answer
single
to angry
person
voters.
paying an
Right.
electric bill
Politicians
in
do
Maryland.
not have the
It
luxury
really
of
is.
ignoring
It's become the
optics.
center of a
Voters
huge
do not
political
like their
fight.
city
You've
associated
got
with
a
an
Democratic
international
governor,
sex
frustrated
trafficking scandal.
environmentalists
Which brings
making
us to
some
the
very
political
awkward
uproar.
compromises,
LA City Council
and
members
conservative
like Monica
critics who are
Rodriguez
rightly
and Hugo
calling this
Soto-Martinez
Martinez
are
are demanding
A
he
shell
step
game.
down immediately.
And when you look at the
They
documents
led
we
the
have
charge
today,
on yesterday's
reports,
bombshell, the
budget
City Council
proposals,
resolution
critiques from Senate
directly
Republicans,
targeting the
it is
conflict
really
between
hard to
Olympic
unsee it.
values
Our
and
mission for this
Wasserman's
deep dive is
association
simple.
with the Epstein
Follow the
files.
money.
Yeah.
Always
and State
follow
Senator
the
Lena
money.
Gonzalez
We are going to
and LA
see
County
how a
Supervisor
fund
Janice Hahn are
designed to
piling
fight
on
climate
too.
change
They're
is
telling the
being
press
used to plug
he's a
holes in the
massive
state
distraction
budget.
from the athletes
And we'll dig
the
into the
preparation.
argument that this isn't found money
Everyone
at
in local
all. This
politics
is
wants him
essentially
gone.
a backdoor tax
But then
on
you look at
families.
Mayor Karen
Let's
Bass.
get right into it. The Strategic Energy
caught
Investment
right
Fund.
in the
Sounds
middle
very
of this
official,
nightmare.
very important.
Yeah,
What
her
does it actually
position
do?
highlights
Well,
a really
on
shocking
paper,
reality
it is the
about how the
state's
Olympics
green
actually
piggy bank.
function
The
structurally.
SIF is
Because
managed
she
by the
publicly
Maryland
stated
Energy
she
Administration.
does not
Its
support
whole
the
stated
board's
purpose
decision.
is to
She
reduce
wants
energy
Wasserman
bills,
to step
cut
down.
waste, and fund renewable
But she
energy.
admitted on the
Like
record
solar panels
that she
and efficiency
literally does
upgrades.
not have the
Exactly.
power to fire
But here
him.
is the real aha moment of this
I
story.
read that and had to do a double take.
Where
It's
does the money
crazy.
actually
The mayor of Los
come
Angeles
from?
can't fire the guy
Because
running
they
the
aren't
Los
just
Angeles
taxing
Olympics.
you directly
No, she
for it.
can't.
It reveals
No,
a
and that's why
startling
politicians
truth that
absolutely
most
love
people
it. It
do
feels
not
free.
realize when
So
their
about
city wins
40%
an
comes from
Olympic bid.
regional carbon auctions.
Yes, cities host
But the
the
big
games,
chunk,
they
the one
provide the
growing
streets,
like crazy,
the police,
comes
for
from something
security,
called
the sanitation,
alternative
the
compliance
infrastructure.
payments. Right.
But to get
Or
the games, the host
ACPs.
city
Which is just a
contract
fancy government term
forces
for a
the city
fine.
Right.
to surrender
It's a fine
actual
for failure.
control
Let me break it
to
down.
a private
Maryland
independent
law
forces
organizing
utility
committee.
companies
So the
to buy
International
a
Olympic
certain
Committee
amount
does that
of
on
green
purpose.
energy.
Right.
They have to
They
prove they're
force
using
cities to
renewables.
create these
But if they
independent
can't find that
committees to
green
shield
energy,
the
or if it's
games
just
from
way too
local
expensive on the
political
market,
turnover.
Which it
Like,
usually is.
if a new
Yeah, the
mayor
state
gets
gives them an
elected who
escape
hates the
hatch.
Olympics,
The utility
the
can just pay a
IOC
fee
ensures
directly
that
to
new
the state
mayors can't
instead.
just cancel
That
the
fee
games.
is
That
the
is the
ACP.
exact mechanism.
And here's the kicker.
But it creates a monster
Utilities
the
are
city cannot
increasingly
control.
just
I mean,
paying
it is
the
like being
fine
a
because it's
landlord who
cheaper
rents
than
out a
actually
house to a
buying the
tenant.
green energy.
But you
Wait, so
legally
the
write
climate
into the
fund is
lease
getting
that
incredibly
you, the
rich.
landlord, have absolutely no right to
Precisely
evict them,
because
even
the
if the
green
tenant
energy
sets the
mandates are
living room
failing.
on fire.
Precisely.
great way
It
to
is
put
a
it.
completely
The city takes on all the
perverse
burden,
incentive.
all the
The
traffic, all the
government made the
security
mandates
costs,
so aggressive,
but
and the
they
market
give
is
up
so
the steering wheel
distorted
entirely.
that power
Yeah,
companies
and
are
it
just
prompts
writing checks
critical
to the
thinking
state
about
instead
who
of
really
going
runs our
green.
cities
stats
when
on this are
billions of
just
dollars are on
staggering.
the line.
They are. The elected
In
mayor is
2022,
effectively
this revenue
sidelined
was
$77
by a
million.
private
nonprofit
By
board
2025,
protecting their
it
chief
jumped to
fundraiser.
So what does this all mean for
$365
you,
million.
listening right now?
Wow.
Why should you care about a boardroom fight in Los Angeles over a
Right, so now the state
23-year-old
has this
email? Because this is not
massive
just celebrity
accidental pot
gossip.
of gold. It's
This is a
supposedly for green
masterclass in how
projects.
power,
But remember, that money
accountability, and
didn't
money
just fall
operate
out of
at
the
the
sky.
highest
Utility
levels of our
companies
society.
paid those fines.
It exposes a
And do you
really
think those massive
uncomfortable
corporations
reality
just
about
eat
modern
that
civic
cost out of the
life.
goodness of their hearts?
Local
Oh,
democracy
absolutely not. They
ends
pass
where the
every
Olympic
single penny of
funding
that
gap
onto the
begins.
customer.
Exactly. It
forces
shows up
us to
right on your
ask
electric
what
bill. So
standard
you,
of ethics we
the everyday
demand from the
ratepayer,
people who
are
represent us on the
paying for
global
the
stage.
utilities' failure
does
to meet a government
private
mandate.
nonprofit
The state
get
collects
to
your money,
decide the moral
drops it
standard
in the
for an
safe,
entire
and
city
says,
simply
look
because
at all this
they
cash we
hold
have
the
for the
checkbook?
climate.
Yeah,
Which
we
brings
started
us to the
deep dive
raid.
talking about taking a black
Because
light
that
to the
money is
VIP
definitely
section.
not staying
The
in the
Epstein
climate
Files
fund.
Transparency
Not
Act
anymore.
flipped
Enter
that
Governor
switch,
Wes Moore.
and we are still watching
His
the stains
administration
glow.
is staring down a
The law
projected
forced these documents into the
$1.5
open,
billion
but
budget
information alone does
deficit.
not create accountability. The
1.5
files gave us
billion.
the raw data.
You can't just
But what
ignore
happens
a
next
hole
is
that deep.
entirely
You can't.
dependent on the hidden structures
And when
of power.
government overspends
It is
to
a
that
question
degree,
every
they
future
start
host city
checking
needs
under
to
the
answer
couch before they
cushions
sign
for
that
loose
contract.
change.
Absolutely.
Except
Yeah.
here, the couch
Which leaves us
cushion
with
is the
a
green
lingering
energy fund,
provocative question
and
to
the
chew
loose
on as we
change
wrap
is
up
hundreds
today.
of millions of taxpayer dollars.
So what's
If
the
the
actual
city of Los
proposal? How much are
Angeles-
they taking?
The
mayor,
governor's plan
the council,
diverts
the voters,
$292
is
million
completely powerless
directly from the
to
SID
remove a
into the
compromised
state's
leader
general
just
fund.
because he
Just
holds
to
the
balance
keys
the
to corporate
books.
sponsorship.
just to cover their overspending.
Do the Olympics actually belong
They
to the
are
host
using
city?
energy fines to
Or
pay
do they
for
only belong to the
general government
billionaires funding them?
operations.
That is the
Bureaucracy,
multi-billion-dollar
salaries,
question.
office
It really is.
supplies, you
Think about
name
that next
it.
time you see
But
those
that's not
5
even all
rings
of it.
lit up
Yeah.
on your
I read in
television
this
set. sources, there's also
Thanks for joining us on this
rebate
deep dive. Keep
Yes,
asking questions,
this is the
and
part
we'll see you
critics
next time.
are calling